Irashaimase. Welcome to Paprika Girl's Midnight Diner, which is always recorded with a bottle of good sake in hand. And now that we are in Kando, the season of the cold mist, my sake is atsukan. That's hot sake, for those who don't know. Isn't it wonderful that sake can be enjoyed both hot and cold, and room temperature too? I am serving up a bottle of ganki from Yamaguchi Prefecture. Ganki is written duck tree, and today is the season of gankitaru, or the ducks are here, referring to the migrating waterfowl. It has grown cooler here in Tokyo, so tonight I am no longer keeping my window open as I gaze at the garden. Instead, I am in my zashiki, warm and cozy. I am debating setting up the kotatsu. The table I'm sitting at is a simple item from Mujirushi Yohin. It has an electric heater attached to the bottom side of it, and the top flat bit is removable. Between the legs/heater apparatus and said top, one may sandwich a fluffy duvet so that if you turn on the heater, your legs will stay nice and cozy beneath the table. This is a kotatsu. Some older homes will even have hori kotatsu, which are holes cut right into the ground so that one does not need to kneel. You don't have to kneel, of course. The table in the parlor on which I do much of my editing is also a tall kotatsu. I can sit on the sofa and have my legs all toasty and cat quite happy there too. You see, this item is only one of many involved in the winterization of Japanese homes. I meant to speak about this today. I actually have a little cat-shaped notepad in front of me tonight with a memo of what to speak about this recording. I don't know if that is a good thing or not, because these are hazy, lazy drinking podcasts and meant to be a ramble, not a lecture. But last time the Gaijin Podcast Collective gathered online in the X space, we determined to discuss the winterization experience while living in Japan. I would very much like to hear from someone in Hokkaido or Okinawa, come to think of it. Dan World Tour, aren't you in Okinawa? But let me see. As an immigrant, one must be aware that despite outward appearances, Japan is not the West. What I mean to say is, the Japanese approach to many things may look similar to what we in the West do, when in reality, there is a unique history and evolution of process which did not flow in the same way as our own countries. The very best approach to moving to a new country is to forget all you know about your own country and take Japan, or anywhere, as your newfound logic. I just remembered a quote from Werner Heisenberg, who said, "What we observe is not nature herself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning." In other words, we must not take for granted that our own perspective on the way things are is the only way to look at it. I suppose it's related, though it's an odd quote to pop into my head, isn't it? Back to the weather, though. So many gaijin from the West spend plenty of time tweeting their complaints about the weather. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's not insulated enough, it's this, it's that. Why is Japan, Japan, and not like my own country? Being hot or cold is a balance of objectivity and subjectivity, and cannot be argued away, however. So, what is the Japanese approach to the hot and cold weather? And how does one prepare for the winter when living in an old Japanese house? This is my experience. I live in Kanto, in West Tokyo, in a house that is 90 years old. We specifically chose this house because we love the old architecture, with the straight beams, the ranma above the shoji and paper doors, the massive vestibule, and tatami in every room. But naturally, since it is a very old house, it is built to be winterized by traditional methods and does not have modern insulation. The first thing I do is to bubble wrap the windows. There is a type designed for window panes. It is patterned to be elegant when seen from the outside. It fits nicely behind the shoji and cannot be seen from the inside. The next thing is to replace the curtains in the engawa. Winter curtains are thicker and keep the heat in. After this, I lay down hot carpets, big ones that cover the entirety of the floor. My cat loves it. I plan to share plenty of happy cat on the hot carpet pictures when the time comes. Next, I change all the bedding, adding warming pads and wonderfully fluffy down. All the sheets are changed from cooling sheets to fleece, naturally. Then the space heaters are brought out. We use kerosene ones, and this is only because it is an old Japanese house. More on that in a moment. In addition to the space heaters, we set up the naga hibachi. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Old Japanese houses are drafty. That means they let in a lot more oxygen than modern, hermetically sealed houses. If you are using a kerosene heater, even a modern indoor one, which are very safe, you must be in a drafty house, or you must crack a window. The threat of carbon monoxide poisoning is very real if you live in a modern house. But the benefit of the kerosene heaters is that you only need one per floor. I live in a 2-story house, and it's more than enough. You can also keep a kettle simmering on the top perpetually to keep the air moistened. Now, the naga hibachi is a wonderful staple of traditional Japanese space heating, which has its own benefits. A naga hibachi is a bit of furniture in the middle of which are smoldering kunugi coals. Note, I said kunugi. These are not barbecue coals. These are tea coals. It is surrounded by a lovely bed of ash, which you can poke at and pattern in any way you please. On top of these coals is a grill. On the grill, you can roast chestnuts and ginnan, heat sake, and enjoy all sorts of snacks while warming your hands. But note again, this wonderful piece of furniture uses coals. Yes, tea coals, but coals. That means a modern, non-drafty house cannot use it. Perhaps on the veranda, if you have one. Besides those space heaters, we also break out the clothes. Our samue change to become fleece-lined ones. We wear heat-tech socks and slippers. We use hanten, little house coats, which my husband insists must be called chanchanko, although they are not. And we can turn on the floor heating in the kitchen. All of this heats the house just fine, and usually we don't even turn on the aircon. The thing is, we live in Tokyo, and it rarely gets that cold in Tokyo. Something like 10 degrees Celsius usually, maybe a little bit colder at nights. It may snow once in a blue moon. Oh yes, and like I mentioned, the kotatsu. In 2 of our rooms we have kotatsu. None of them are these dugout horikotatsu, just the ones you put on top of the floor. One is short for tatami use, and one is very tall for chair use. I can assure you that my cat loves both of them. What is nice is that I put them on top of the hot carpets. You don't even need to turn the kotatsu on, and it's nice and poka underneath. Old houses in the countryside will have even more ways to hunker down for the winter, such as shutters and mudrooms in front of the entrance to the home. But if you are a newcomer to Japan, I must once again insist that you not approach living in the country as if it is simply a Western country in another language. The The way of doing things here suits the locals just fine, otherwise they would change it. Perhaps it is time for you to consider turning Japanese. Now, I have here a little list responding to things people said in the Gaijin Podcast Collective. First, Softy Papa. How about you write your topic in coal right on the rocks you collect? You could even keep your rocks and take a nice photo of them lined up all legibly at the end of your stint in the US as your accomplishment over the last 80 days. That way, you won't lose track of what you wanted to say. Second, Kevin. I have something scribbled here about looking the part. Your mentioning that phrase made me think of the Saitama girls. So here's a little statement. Not really an anecdote, so much as an observation. Kichijoji, the town in which I live, has become somewhat of a tourist spot over the last few years. We have the Inokashira Park with its famous sakura in the spring and momiji in the autumn, and little boats on the pond, and the zoo, the aquarium, and picnic spaces. The Ghibli Museum is here too. Then there are all these tiny little boutiques, dive bars, live houses, theaters, and a ridiculously plentiful selection of food, from sushi and soba to Ethiopian, Russian, and even Chicago deep dish pizzas. For this reason, the afternoon streets are filled with gaggles of schoolgirls, all looking for their next Instagram shot. And the vast majority of them seem to come from Saitama. Of course, for locals like me, it's bittersweet. We want people to come here and enjoy themselves, but not so many at a time. It gets so crowded on the weekends that we locals cannot get the errands done. But getting back to dressing the part, you can always tell which of the girls trolling the shopping streets are locals and which come from Saitama. Saitama girls are dressed absolutely to the nines. High heels, bright, glittery makeup, teensy-weensy skirts, and 1980s tummies everywhere. Hair in bouncy curls all dyed yellow and purple, false eyelashes, and brand-named handbags. Blasting music from their iPhones and laughing so loud you can hear them coming from the next block. Locals do not dress like that, of course. The ones dressed in jeans and t-shirts and a comfortable, loose attire with minimal makeup are the locals. It really feels like the Saitama girls are going to town. Do you remember the trace image of that? How people used to get dressed up to go to town? Even just out for Sunday service. There was a term for it. Sunday best. I suppose the closest thing to it is when I get nicely dressed for tea ceremonies or when going to a nice theater. I wear kimono regularly, which is considered dressy in this day and age. I suppose I can't really make light of the Saitama girls then. Bother. Now, weekly fascination. I just watched a video on why foreigners leave. I can't comment too much on it, since it's not something that I have dealt with. I'm very ganko, as they say, stubborn, or perhaps ichizu. When I decide on something, I stick with it, hell or high water. So leaving has never crossed my mind, even during dark times. But everyone is different, which is why your podcast was especially interesting to me. There, I heard a number of perspectives, all very valid and sympathetic, even if I have never been in those situations before. But one thing I did pick up on, a comment you made in passing. I thought I could elaborate on that. When are you going home? You decried being asked that by Japanese you first meet, and you're not alone. I hear that often from Gaijin. One of their biggest and most consistent complaints is that Japanese ask them when they are going home or when they have last been home. How dare they ask that? Is that a subtle way of telling me to get lost, foreigner? Why can Japan not be my home? But, in fact, それは勘違い. They're wrong. This is one of those seemingly translatable phrases that is not. Famously, the word feminism in English means something different than feminism when used in Japanese, right? If you don't know, it means womanizer in Japanese. It has nothing to do with the battle of the sexes. In the same way, going home is a heavily cultural question with a load of history to it. I will try to keep this concise. In Japanese, there are innumerable words that mean simply going home. 家に帰る、里帰り、国へ帰る、地元に戻る、家路。For that matter, let's recite some of the words for home. 家, right? 家, お家. How about 自宅, 地元, 自国, 自治, 我が家, 我んち, 住まい, 在宅, 家庭, 家宅, 本家, 実家, 国, 故郷, 本国, 本地, 本所, ふるさと, 母国, 鎖国, 小国, 里, 田舎. That's all I can think of. I have a feeling I'll be remembering other words for home in the shower for days to come from now on. You see, during the Edo period, in order to keep the power focused in Edo, Tokugawa had the important houses of any given territory travel back and forth between Edo and their homelands once every year. This was called Sankin Kotai. This meant a huge entourage, sometimes hundreds of people, traveling back and forth along the highways constantly. In Edo, therefore, the phrase, "When are you going home?" or "When are you returning?" was used as readily as we use "What's up?" here today. By the end of the Sankin Kotai, still Tokyo was now the center of the country, so people came for business and studies unavailable in their own territories. Once again, the proliferation of "When are you going home?" or "Are you going home?" for holidays still continued. The same culture persists today. Most people living in the big cities are travelers. Out of 10 people in Tokyo, only one will actually be from Tokyo. Even if they have lived in Tokyo for decades, they will still say Kanazawa, Hokkaido, Yamaguchi, or whatever when they are asked, "Where are you from?" Why? Because the concept of home and country, inextricable from one another, flows through their blood. Do you remember how Scarlett O'Hara was so obsessed with the state of her home Terra? Or how in Gladiator, our hero Maximus was always thinking of going home? Those two films reflect specific character motivations for wanting to go home. But in Japanese culture, somehow that feeling permeates the air in such a way so that even if there is no one waiting in their hongoku, or perhaps they may have never even been there themselves, the pull of ancestral lands still exists somewhere in their psyche. あのふるさとへ帰ろうかな、帰ろうかな. It's a famous lyric from the Kitakuni no Haru, as sung by Kitajima Saburo, and you will find dozens of songs about returning home in Enka. It is a genre in itself, called Gotouchi song. Mizumori Kaori is famous for singing a whole wash of these. The John Denver song, Country Roads, persists in popularity in Japan because the Japanese soul resonates so well with the message. There are many times of year when the travelers do, in fact, have a united opportunity to go home. Obon, Nemmatsu Nenshi, the New Year's. When a family member dies, and then the 49 days after that, and a year after that, and there are many excuses to return. On top of all that, the family grave is a big deal. Since many generations are interred in one pseudo-crypt, the stone is washed and polished often. Incense is offered in memoriam, and someone needs to take care of it. This, too, is a duty for which one must return home. If you have ever been at any drinking party with Japanese people who do not know one another, what the conversation will be is a lot of prying. Where are you from? Where are your parents from? What school did your second cousin go to? Where did you go for your honeymoon? The reason is they are trying to find some point of commonality. It is somewhat easier for locals because I lived in Shizuoka can somehow be linked to a random, oh, then you know Fuji yakisoba and kurohanpen. To which the other party can reply, my, that Fuji yakisoba is unique, and I cannot find kurohanpen anywhere in Tokyo. There is this one place in Kanda. And the conversation goes on from there. But with a foreigner, it's harder. I'm from Chicago, so it's easy for some people to say, I flew there through transit, or I used to like Michael Jordan as a kid. Perhaps even Chicago blues, which is dangerous because if I admit I like Chicago blues, many very musically inclined people will start listing the names of obscure bass players, which I admittedly know nothing about. Embarrassment all along. But I'm getting back to the point. I'm trying ultimately to tell you that being asked when you are going back or going home is in no way related to your being a foreigner. Japanese ask each other this, and constantly. Alright, I think this recording has gone on a little too long already. I feel like there's more to say, but there always is. This Atsukan sake has me sleepy. I suppose I can wrap this one up with the word NAGOMI. It means calming down, settling in, and beginning to enjoy oneself. I hope that you can settle in and enjoy the coming seasons, your newfound home in a new country to be discovered, and with people you love. I look forward to the winter days of drinking Atsukan at the Tachinomi in the shopping street of Kichijoji, and here in my winterized old Japanese house. Good times to come. Oyasumi, everyone.